Welcome back to Wowza Studio Sessions, live from the floor of NAB. My name is Aubrey Russell. I'm the head of production at LiveX, a live production company based in Manhattan. And I'm happy to have our happy hour segment. This is our 5 o'clock segment. We're very excited. We have beer on set. Drink responsibly. And I have Jay Nemeth and Scott Gillies from Flightline Films with me today. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us. Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Of course, of course. So can you talk to me a little bit about what you do at Flightline Films?
So Flightline Films caters to the aerospace industry primarily, and we provide webcasting solutions, long-range optical tracking of rocket launches. We also design and build camera systems for space capsules and rockets, cameras that work in vacuum that are able to be taken on orbit, and kind of integrate all the solutions together. And so it's kind of unique in that the long-range optical tracking is really only available from the Air Force or from NASA. So we provide some of the only privately owned long-range trackers. And then, of course, the cameras on board has traditionally been a NASA area of expertise. But as we've switched to the private space sector, the private companies need these services also.
That's amazing. As an Air Force brat, I'm very impressed by that.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So what are some projects that you guys have worked on in the past, just to give a sense of scope for everyone?
Yeah, so Scott and I met on Red Bull Stratos, which was, for those that didn't see it, Felix Baumgartner jumped from the edge of space and skydived back to Earth. So, it was important that Red Bull was able to capture that live. And so Scott was working for Red Bull at the time and the head of technology and that, and so we started to come up with the solutions and the designs for how are we going to capture this event. And ultimately, this tiny capsule that he rode up in, which was just a one-man capsule, in the very top held a thing we called the keg, because it looked like a beer keg, perfect for happy hour.
Yeah.
Perfect happy hour. And inside this was 12 HD recorders and 3 microwave transmitters and converters and a cooling system and 9 HD cameras on the outside. 4 the Red One had just come out when we started that project, so we had 3 4K digital cinema cameras on board, and that was really the place where we could cut our teeth, and we're going to come up with some really innovative technologies to cover this event.
Yeah, and the technologies that you built for this and the other things that you've developed, are those available for sale, or are these completely just owned by Flightline and only available with Flightline?
Most of that technology is Flightline IP, and we mostly provide services and facilities for people that want to do that type of thing. We have been approached to design and build some space-rated cameras for some of our customers. We've designed cameras that can look into the cryogenic propellant tanks on rockets, so you can actually see the oxidizer and the fuel levels depleting inside the tank. And so because those fuels and oxidizers are at absolute zero, electronics fail when they get that cold. So we have some unique solutions to doing that type of thing. And so those are very kind of specific requests, and we'll design and sell that equipment.
Yeah.
I think with the evolution of private space in the time since Stratos, a lot of what we developed and what Jay's company at the time that Red Bull took advantage of, really lended itself to helping private space do certain things, so they didn't have to reinvent technology that NASA and Air Force would have. We were able to provide those systems for them, and they were, really primarily based on off-the-shelf solutions that were customized and developed to work in that environment.
Yeah. When you say private space, besides SpaceX, are there many? This is a honest question. Are there many private space companies?
Yeah, under that heading, you'd have Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, Bigelow Aerospace, a lot of companies that cater to space tourism or private experiments, universities, and aren't necessarily a government contractor for, say, launching spy satellites or something like that.
We've worked with a few of the Hyperloop developers, so those are actually technically vacuums, right? So it's space inside of a tube.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of endeavors that take or have the requirements for these specialty systems, and we really just look for those applications and see where we can help those companies thrive.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I feel like I always used to say we don't produce in a vacuum. And you do produce
we like to
in a
produce
vacuum. Yeah, I'm like, no, you have an audience. You don't produce in a vacuum. You have to. You produce
true.
in a vacuum.
It's a challenge too.
I can imagine. Now you also have a 4K trailer, 4K truck that you use, and you've done the Thanksgiving 360 parade.
Correct.
For many years in a row.
Yep.
So with the 4K evolution, obviously, television's still catching up. ATSC3 is showing up all over NAB. We still haven't taken the full step. We're not Japan. We're not up to that level.
Yeah.
Speaking of Japan, already at 8K, we're also seeing a huge push from Blackmagic this year with 8K. Seems to be slightly jumping the gun with the level of their 4K equipment right now. Wasn't sure. I know you guys have a great relationship with Blackmagic. Your trailer's all deck truck. I don't know if you call it a truck or a trailer.
Yeah, both.
We call ours a trailer because it has to be attached on a hitch to something else.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know if what the conversations you've had with them, what they're kind of looking forward to, or what you think that this is really a play for in that case, with the lack of, obviously there's 8K TVs on the market, but the number of consumers that actually have an 8K television are able to watch that content, the number of producers who are making 8K content, and the number of content creators or advertising companies that are paying for 8K content.
Yeah. Do you want to take the 8K?
8K, I'll just share with you what we've discussed and a lot of our colleagues who, we're always excited and fans of technology, and we like to see the progression in technology. But it is a little bit of a head scratcher why the Japanese are so bullish on developing 8K. There are a lot of systems. There are a lot of gaps in the system. Acquisition. So Blackmagic made a great announcement. There's really, I think, amazing products in the 8K realm, which is great. Except you can't shoot because there's no camera that'll do a production for their new switcher, right? Yes, their recorders will do it, but how do you get the content into that? So, I think there's a lot that has to come on board. My personal opinion is what that does, that bandwidth in the devices, it actually makes the 4K better, right? So it doubles up your 4K capacity, and for that reason alone, it's a better innovation, right? So I'm a big fan of it. I am scratching my head why push it so much, but I'm not privileged to everything that they're doing in Japan, and I would like to see them have a successful Olympics in 8K and see how that really gets to audiences at mass scale. And we should learn our lessons from it and go after it.
We know that's happening, right? The Olympics will be broadcast by NHK and 8K. I don't think we'll be able to see it here in the States, but in Japan you will. But I don't think it's bad to position yourself kind of ahead of that bleeding edge. When Blackmagic started building 4K switchers, people said, why are you building these? Like it makes no sense. But you have to start somewhere. And like Scott said, the 8K equipment does enhance your 4K experience. So, we got into 4K because the aerospace people are bleeding edge technology with spacecraft, and they want their webcasts and their coverage to also be, a comparative level of technological expertise. We do, VR 360, as you mentioned, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and that really, 4K is the minimum, I believe, for that to have any kind of significant experience. Right now, the limiting factors to me anyway, for VR is that the head-mounted displays just don't render the full 4K signal, and you're not really getting that same experience. If you look at the monitors in the truck, the Equirectangular has got amazing contrast, deep blacks, and the picture looks incredible. You put the HMD on and it's not there. Once they get these displays, the VR goggles worked out, where they can actually display high quality signals with all that dynamic range and the colorimetry, I think 8K is going to be the natural progression for that, because you have to wrap a 360 degree picture around you. Now, of course, there's a lot of technologies, and rightfully so, that talk about, well, why are you rendering all of this if you're only looking at this portion? Maybe you should just render that portion in high resolution and let the peripheral be in lower resolutions. But whatever you're looking at in VR, 8K would be a wonderful, wonderful system to view it on.
Yeah, I think that's so heavily in the gaming world too. Being so much in the live world myself, I'm just not as, I haven't seen as much use for live VR. Obviously, I believe the last Olympics did have a live, it was a day after that you could watch the previous day in live, in 360 VR as live.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see. Obviously, the VR goggles have been out for a while now, and there hasn't been, to my knowledge, very much advancement in the actual goggles themselves.
Interestingly enough, when we broadcast these shows, only a fraction of people are using a head-mounted display or a Google Cardboard. Most people are just holding their mobile device and they're using it as a window to the world, which is cool also. But using an iPad to experience these things probably won't drive a jump into higher resolution. But I mean, there's a lot of other uses. If you can capture content in 8K, it gives you the option, not only in post, but even live, like in a sporting event, to punch in and get closer. And you could eventually reach the resolution where you don't even need to pan cameras and follow. You can just capture the entire play field and zoom in till you have a tight, close-up of the person's reaction to, sinking a basket.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We've talked a lot about, virtual camera angles and really developing systems where, doing a Red Bull type of event where you can only rehearse it once and actually record it. Using a system where you have as much information as possible makes a ton of sense, and I think the technology is coming to be able to stitch all that together and create these ultra high definition captures that allow you to then go back and change angles. I think we've already seen it with some unique shots in sporting events, but I think that technology will continue to come on board and change the game and the way we watch games and experience events.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Matterport, the camera? Have you heard of
yes.
it? Yeah. It's used a lot in real estate, obviously. But it's like a 270-degree camera that you place in different parts of the house, for this matter, and it stitches together the full house. So it's similar to like a Google Maps where you can walk the streets and you just click and you keep moving, you click and you keep moving.
Really good. I think it simplifies the capture as well. So it's used in real estate. I've seen it in real estate. That's exactly where I've seen it.
It's very impressive. Obviously, it's still images, so you're not in an active live environment. But that's something that to me, that is the future of 360. It's not being able to stand in one place and look at everything around you. It's being able to walk to wherever you want to walk within that environment.
You navigate.
Yeah.
One of the things that Scott and I started working on years ago was the whole idea of not to treat coverage of these events as cameras and lenses, but the acquisition of optical data. And if you could capture all the optical data of a football game inside a dome from every angle, there's no reason why you couldn't generate new virtual camera angles and positions, live and in real time, and place the camera wherever you wanted and see the action and replay things and be in places that are physically impossible for a camera. And people would say, well, it wouldn't really be the live game. This would be a recreation. But, light going through a lens and hitting a sensor being turned into an electronic signal, that's not the actual experience. If you were standing there, there's always an electronic translation. And so if you can capture enough optical data, you can faithfully recreate an environment that would be as photorealistic as anything else.
That's very true. That's amazing. I do think that to me is going to be a much larger play than 360.
Yes.
Which obviously is capable in like a VR video game because it's all a world that's been
Exactly.
created, or even if it's not animated and it's real humans acting or real characters in it, they've still been able to record all of this footage and stitch it together.
And that's the key thing. In a video game, all the mapping of characters and guns and the environment, it all already exists. So you can render whatever side of whatever object from whatever point of view and whatever distance, very quickly, because all that optical data, that was all decided ahead of time. In a football game, you can't decide it ahead of time. But if you had enough sensors to gather the optical data, it's an incredible amount of computing power to crunch all those numbers. But it'd be very similar to a video game.
So I'm picturing this, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm picturing this similar to how they create like Gollum in Lord of the Rings with the dots, and how then that's something that it attaches to. Is that similar to when you say the optical data? Is that like the same idea of the structure that would be built with the cameras?
It's motion capture, but without the golf balls and
Yes.
the person in the blue suit.
Gotcha.
Basically,
It's like- you'd
you'd be gathering the actual, instead of mapping textures and images onto the form later, you would be gathering the actual optical data. And many years ago, we were kind of on the bleeding edge of motion capture and worked with a company called Westwood Studios that doesn't exist now. But as we would use real actors to act out, the Marines coming out the back of the helicopter on a green screen, we said, well, instead of having the camera anchored, let's create a virtual camera. And I basically would stand in the middle of the set with a crossbar with ping pong balls on it and a little home camera just so I could frame the shots. And that's how we tracked the movements and then assign focal lengths to that later. And now that's very common. I think everybody shoots mocap in that manner.
Yeah, as someone who, like I said, comes from the live world, I'm very intrigued by all of those pieces of technology that we are just not using, simply because there's not a need for it right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a whole other.
Well, yeah, I think in that realm too, like what we're talking about is on the high end of production. But what's always most exciting about NAB and these new products, especially with Blackmagic and others who are really working to make technology accessible to all types of content creators. And that's really where you're going to get a lot of the most unexpected and great storytelling, sometimes not great storytelling, but that's okay, right? The mass amount that's possible and capable, and the tools that you have now that used to fit in giant production studios that I've built in the past now are shrunken down into a suitcase. And that's the power of the technological revolution that we're going through, and it's just accelerating and going faster. So, we can do 8K. I'm pretty sure we'll be at 16K.
Somebody will ask for it very soon.
Somebody will ask for it very soon.
It just depends on where it's going
And
too, because
it'll fit in a beer can.
It's interesting how a lot of these innovations that we do that are driven by aerospace, they end up spooling us off into other things like the VR 360 and doing music festivals, Lollapalooza, Coldplay concert, the Empire of the Sun, Macy's Parade. It's just, sometimes there's needs for things that you really aren't aware of. So I think Blackmagic building 8K equipment doesn't necessarily mean that they have some crystal ball and are seeing into the future, but they're positioning themselves to be ready for it. This is one of the things when we developed all the technology for Red Bull Stratos. After that, we would go to a lot of the space conferences with proven solutions and technologies for capturing these things. And that was always the comment we got is, instead of you guys talking about it and thinking about, here's our plan for the future, like you've already built the stuff and it's already out there in the field working. And so it's great to always kind of be on that bleeding edge.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having a beer with me. It's much appreciated. And today, as every day this week, you've been watching this on the wonderful Wowza Clearcaster encoder. We're very excited to be in the Wowza booth. Thank you so much for hosting us another year, Wowza Studio Sessions. It's the end of day one of NAB, and we'll be back tomorrow live at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see you then.